Here are the facts. After leading Libya for over 40 years, Muammar Gaddafi was assassinated in October of 2011. What ostensibly began as a civil war became an international conflict. Western powers armed rebels and conducted airstrikes. Many US voters weren't sure why NATO intervened in Libya. In an April 2011 statement, NATO described the intervention as a humanitarian act, protecting Libyans by removing Gaddafi. This reasoning remains controversial. After all, there's no shortage of brutal dictators. What made Libya different? Who exactly were its rebels? Here's where it gets crazy. Why topple the Libyan regime and allow despots across the world to survive? It's a good question. In the absence of hard evidence, theories proliferate. As in the Iraq invasions, many theories center on oil. Libya has the largest proven oil reserves in Africa. For years, Gaddafi pushed for the nationalization of regional oil resources. Could this be cause for war? It's true that nationalization and independence bit into private profits after World War II. Countries that actually own oil began to circumvent Western multinationals and sell their resources directly. As Brian Levy cites, in 1949, 7 major oil companies owned 88% of traded oil. By 1953, they owned 73%, not counting oil in the United States or communist countries. In the 50s, the companies had revenue of about 80 cents per barrel. By 1970, it fell to 38 cents. This isn't the only theory. Gaddafi also wanted a financially united Africa with its own regional currency, an African dinar tied to the gold standard and a central bank. Would moving away from petrodollars and reducing the influence of the IMF and World Bank be enough to right Gaddafi's death warrant? Gaddafi's government wasn't the first to push for these sorts of rules. Saddam Hussein wanted to sell oil in euros, and Iran has made similar signals. Correlation isn't causation, but oil and banking were factors in the conflict. Rebel forces established a new central bank and a new oil company just weeks after overtaking the country. So who are these rebels? The answer's complicated. Some have been tied to terrorist groups, and then there's Khalifa Hifter, one of the top men in Libya's new government. He was a colonel of Gaddafi's army until he defected, and before returning to Libya in 2011, he lived for 20 years outside Langley, Virginia, with no visible means of support, leading journalists to deem him a CIA asset. This isn't to say that Gaddafi was a saint, but it is important to note that NATO's narrative leaves questions unanswered. Was the Libyan conflict really an altruistic act of humanitarianism, or was there another motivation? Something that NATO doesn't want you to know.